In case you didn't know, I hit 10,000 subscribers a couple days ago, and I do have a video on my channel talking about all that kind of stuff, my thoughts on it, and things that I want to do in the future. But if you don't feel like 20 minutes of me not talking about Xenoblade, there is a Google survey in the description that's kind of a cliff notes of the questions I asked in that video, and just kind of gauging your opinion on certain things I've considered doing. Other than that, massive spoilers for Xenoblade Chronicles 1, and let's get on with the show. While a lot of people may disagree with the progression system in place in Torna the Golden Country, most people did enjoy what it brought to the story and how having a smaller, somewhat self-contained campaign that sort of sets up things in the main game and fleshes out on stuff we'd only seen in flashbacks or heard mentioned was very good for the story as a whole, and Mithra and Jin specifically. A lot of people after that were talking about, oh, if they ever remake Xenoblade 1 or do an HD remaster of it, they should do a little Torna-like campaign for that. And very obviously, the thing everyone wants to do is flesh out the Battle of Sword Valley, have a small campaign starring Dunban, Dixon, and Mumkar leading up to that moment. Say, start off at level 20, work your way to 30, and then boom, you fight the Mechon there at level 30, and it's a harder fight than the one you get in the main game. And yeah, that would be cool, and would probably give you an excuse to use the unused Bionis shoulder map, which you could just say, oh, we already know Mumkar is from a different colony that's not one of the sex number ones, so that's colony 3 or whatever, and that's where he comes from. And there you go, there's your main new area for that, since Bionis shoulder was huge. Then, I don't know, repurpose Gower Plain, Colony 6, that sort of area, and do a little bit of Sword Valley, and there you got a whole Torna-sized campaign. That would be cool. I would like to see that if they decided to make that, but I have another idea on what you could do for the Torna of Xenoblade Chronicles 1. And that would be, and people are gonna hate this video now that I'm talking about this, to go after the end and instead focus on the one character who didn't get much closure, Melia. My idea behind this is, first off, the literal ending cutscene of Xenoblade shows everyone just talking together, enjoying themselves. Fiora comes back, everyone's together with someone else, except for Melia. She's just standing in the park alone, looking out over the world, and yeah, she and Fiora talk, and they're clearly as close to each other as they were before, but she still seems unfulfilled and unsatisfied, and, well, for good reason knowing what happened to her, despite the fact that the world is saved and we're now in a new world with infinite possibilities. Also, I think that it would be possible to have future games or future stories set in this new world Shulk created at the end of the game without ruining the ending of the original, assuming that you went far enough in the future to where everyone, including, like, Vanea, is dead. So, like, make the story of Shulk and friends the distant past, or set something on a different continent where they won't be bothering anyone. Now, I know I do have my theory where, because it seems like they're trying to unify all the Xeno games now, that Xenoblade 1 and 2 are in the same universe now. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm just talking about the idea of having a small campaign to both set up the idea of this new world and possibly use it as a setting for future stories that might not even tie into the old cast, and also to give Melia the closure she needs and kind of deserves. So, what would be my idea for this? What would the plot of this be? First off, I'd want to actually time skip. And not just, oh, there was a time skip between Shulk recreating the universe and Fiora coming back in the ending cutscene. I'm talking about time skipping after that by at least a couple of years. As in, Shulk, Fiora, Rein, Sharla, they will all get actual new designs of them looking a little bit older. Melia's not going to change because she ages slowly, and like 2 or 3 years isn't going to do much to her. Dunban, he's 30. Once you're 30, 2 or 3 years doesn't make too big of a difference. Ricky, I don't think Napon visibly age once they reach sexual maturity anyway. And other characters would just be like NPCs or something, and their designs wouldn't matter as much. But you could get the designers to stretch their creative muscles, envision these characters a couple years older. I do have an idea that would involve Shulk actually fighting, but he would still definitely go to his lab work. I don't know if he'd go back to weapon development or just something else, but I imagine his main design when he's not fighting to be wearing a lab coat and intentionally harking a little bit back to Klaus, just as a bit of an in-joke there and kind of a reference to the fact that they're definitely two sides of the same coin in terms of what they actually are. As for plot, it could just be, yeah, life is going great in New Colony 9, everything's going wonderfully, Ryan and Charla, Shulk and Fiora are together, Dunban's like the mayor of the town or something, because he's kind of a born leader. But Melia, she's been there, she's been living with her friends or something, I don't know, maybe she lives with Ricky, I can see them doing something like that. Like, just a small Napon house that also has, like, a regular house for a Homs-sized person in it, too. You gotta have a little comedy in there, and I think that would be a good thing to have or something, I don't know. But she still feels unfulfilled, or something. Something along those lines, where, yeah, she acknowledges that she has a good thing going, but she wants something more. And that would be, she sees that everyone is with family. Shulk is with Fiora, they're basically family now, Dunban's related, Ryan and Charla, Ricky has his wife and kids, could just pretend that their marriage somehow got solved. But Melia doesn't have family. Her father and brother are dead, and her mother died of old age a long time ago, but Homs survived. Most of the High-Entio were wiped out, but the Homs are still around, and not every Homs was brought to New Colony 9. There were other settlements on Bionis that maybe they were attacked by the Mechon, but no one went there. Most of the colonies were destroyed, but there's no indication that 6 and 9 were the last ones. And as such, Melia should go out on a journey searching for her Homs family, the descendants of her mother. This gives an opportunity to explore an area of the New World nearby to New Colony 9, which would probably be the starting town, as well as just the region around the corpse of Bionis and a little bit outwards. I'd say just make it a bit of an island with, you don't need to go everywhere on it. And you probably could reuse Bionis' shoulder, but just turn it into like a plains area and just have another town on there. The one thing I loved about Torna is how there were actually multiple towns, as opposed to starting town and big capital town. Just Melia going around the world looking for hints, like just retcon in her mother's name or something and have her just remember that from her childhood and be like, oh, I want to look for this person. Are there stories of a woman by this name who disappeared alongside a mysterious man with wings on his head or something like mine? It's something like that. And as she's going around there, of course, all the wildlife was brought over, so there are still going to be monsters. She has those to fight, and there should probably be, if this is trying to set up a future world, not hints of a new big bad, but just hints that, yeah, the bad people were brought over too. Just because Zanza died doesn't mean other bad people who aren't connected to him don't still exist, and that kind of thing. And those would be your enemies for the majority of the game. Just kind of a person exploring versus nature traditional story like that. But of course, this is a Xenoblade game, and more specifically, this is a Xenoblade 1 game, so you're gonna want more party members than just Melia, right? Like, you can't... Torna had 9 party members, technically. X, you could have 4 on the field, and 1, you had 3. The Battle of Sword Valley idea for this type of campaign would have been Dunban, Dix, and Mumkar. But the whole point of this is that Melia is the only party member from the original game who actually had closure, so she should be the only one playable in this one, because the others are content to live at home and don't really have a reason to go adventuring, even if they would like to help their friend. They have other stuff they need to do. They have responsibilities of whatever's going on now. So, who are the other 2 party members? Well, I think the first one is one that makes a lot of sense, because this is someone who you clashed with a bit in the past, but ended up reconciling and has a very close connection to Melia. And that should be her fellow half-Entia, and they're effectively related even though not by blood, that being Tyrea. It's mentioned at the end of the Melancholy Tyrea side quest that apparently her and either Melia's or the entire party's paths will cross again because they have similar goals or something. That's not really explained at all, and she doesn't help them against Zanza or anything like that, but I could see her also now, because obviously Yumea's gone, you kind of kill her yourself, but she would probably want to find her Homs family as well, because she is also a half-Entia who is, like, conceived as part of some weird ritual that's part of the Bionite Order, and after seeing what Zanza did to the rest of the Telethia, she probably also wants to atone, because she most likely would feel like she was partly responsible for that, so at some point, just have her showing up in the colony be the inciting incident that makes Melia decide to leave. Like, your tutorial could just be half an hour of gameplay of just going around the colony, offering to kill a couple monsters for someone and that kind of thing. But who would the third party member be? You got 2 High-Entia, one of which used to be a princess before the society completely collapsed, and one of which was the daughter of a queen, basically, so maybe another princess? I don't know. Well, I think the idea would be, yeah, Melia setting out and doing something, and Dunban or Vanguard or someone who knows about her would be like, yeah, you might not be actively ruling people, but you're still important to the few High Entia who, like, are still around and remember you and stuff, so we gotta send you at least someone. But who would that person be? I don't want to invent a new character or use a minor NPC. I want Juju. After having grown up a few years, unfortunately, you'd have to make the time skip a 5-year one in order to get him to 18, which I think like maybe a 2-3 year time skip would make more sense than any of that. So he would still be a little young, but I could see him somehow having gotten into the Defense Force at a young age, because he's 13 in the original game, and he is actively fighting people defending Colony 6, so I feel like they'd give him an exception, like let him join the new Defense Force or something. And I could see him wanting to prove himself to Rhine, to Charla, probably to the memory of Gatto, just in general. So your party consists of Melia, Tyrea, and Juju. And this is a Juju that's a few years older and is like actually competent, has legitimate military training and stuff, so he will be an older version of the old Juju in personality, but he'll be useful in combat and a competent party member. And I kind of want to get into the gameplay stuff now before I talk about the rest of the story ideas, basically, because he would, well, actually be useful this time, because you can't just bench him like you could Charlotte. You gotta have all 3 people on the field at once, since you're only getting 3 party members in the game. So if you're gonna be handed Juju with a gun, you better be good with a gun, I guess. So in terms of gameplay, Torna basically took the Xenoblade 2 combat system, sped it up a bit, and added 1 or 2 unique mechanics to differentiate it from the base game, and that's all I'd really want out of this kind of thing too. My biggest problems with Xenoblade 1's combat are that it's slower and clunkier compared to every other game in the series, and that there's this one weird issue where sometimes you have to press the A button over an art like 6 times for the art to actually come out. So speed it up, make it less clunky, fix that issue, and you're golden. In terms of weapons, Melia would obviously just still be using her stabs and have her own unique playstyle around summoning the elementals. I think it would be kind of cool if you're going to only have 3 party members, you might as well just give each one a explicitly unique type of gameplay style. So Melia would just be lifting hers straight up from the previous game. Juju would be some combination of Charla and Ryan, I guess, because those are the 2 he'd be studying under. So he'd use a gun, but probably also have the ability to like pistol whip you with it, or have like a club or some other melee weapon. I feel like if you're going to do this kind of thing, you might as well give all 3 party members a ranged and melee auto attacks, since they're going to have both ranged and melee arts. Melia and Tyrea are both competent ether users, and both of their weapons have melee auto attacks in the original game, so just give them shoot ether or hit with weapon. Tyrea has the dual thing, so her melee style could be sort of Fiora-like. I guess Tyrea would be the DPS, Juju would be a tank/healer, and Melia would be the mage-type character and the support, because her elementals would work basically the same way. Tyrea would use dual blades, and then also probably have some single-target ether attacks, as opposed to Melia's very AoE-based stuff. And Juju would be able to do Rhine-type things, like have rage or stuff that increases defense, as well as some healing and curing. Maybe give Tyrea the status curing stuff and Juju the HP healing things to make things a little interesting that way. Like have her, maybe make Tyrea as close to Shulk as possible, and then make Juju closer to Ricky, where you can HP tank it, but not good defenses. Make him better ether resistant, maybe? I don't know. I feel like Juju should have the least ether resistance, since High Entia tend to be good at that kind of thing. But, as always, your main character has to be the frail one, so Melia goes down the quickest, so Tyrea maybe should be a dodge tank, probably. And then Juju would have a bit higher HP than the other 2, but also not be able to take good hit as Tyrea. So Tyrea tank, Melia DPS, Juju healer. Something like that. That makes a bit of sense. And other than that, give each character some arts that they would normally have. Tyrea, you fight her as a boss, she has few arts there. Melia literally has arts from the previous game that she could use. You probably want to start the characters at a level that's not close to 1. So like start them at 20 and have this thing go up to 60, 65 type thing, just to show that, yeah, it's peace, so they're not actively training and getting stronger, but they're still powerful individuals and that kind of thing. Juju's the only one training out of the 3, so he got up to the level they fell to from inactivity, pretty much. And talent arts, I'm thinking Melia would obviously have element burst, but instead of just kind of powering up her element attacks, I could see it as actually being a sort of fake overdrive state. I have kind of the mental image of her pulling out both the Emperor and Empress staff and like supercharging her auto attacks, giving her, I guess, double damage on everything, and then being able to kind of like twirl around and block better, just like supercharging her stats for a short period of time and turning her elemental attacks into like devastating ones, or just supercharging the buffs people give. Tyrea, I'm not really sure what her gimmick could be. She could be the one character that plays a Xenoblade 1 character straight, I guess. And then Juju would be the same rifle heat system that Charla had, but like good. I can't really think of a way to fix it. Or rather, I could think of many ways to fix it and don't feel like elaborating on which one. So that's how the combat would work. But exploration-wise, obviously you'd have a big, wide open world, probably more on the linear side like Xenoblade 1 and 2 as opposed to X, because while I could see you being able to do certain objectives out of order and just having bosses scale to whatever level you are, say you have like 3 different settlements you can go to once you reach the big open area for the first time, and just meet different hums there, and you could do things in whatever order. Maybe you have to do tasks for certain people in certain towns, or help them out in a certain way in order to get information, or the person who might have that information is in trouble, that kind of thing, and you could do that in whatever order. But as a whole, the world should be mostly linear, but with the traditional big Xenoblade area. So like what they did with Torna, they could even have you backtracking a little bit, say certain passages open up, maybe you need to go to one city or a smaller village to talk to an elder to open up a gate into a sacred forest that leads to another place where some weird mystic comms that might have connections to the High Entia were, something like that. But in terms of traversal, I feel like each of these 3 characters actually has something that they could bring to make navigating the world different and more interesting. Melia has her elemental abilities, and I could see her using them in a very similar way as blade field skills were used in Xenoblade 2. So once she has a specific elemental, you can use it on the field in order to trigger certain environmental things, like, say, she could use Summon Flare to light a campfire and just have campfires be your resting saving points. Obviously, you're going to have the regenning HP type thing, but maybe instead of campfires being set locations like they were in Torna, you could just use Summon Flare on the field to make a campfire and rest wherever you want, as long as you're not in a town or something, because there'd be inns and stuff there. And obviously things like summon Aqua to water plants or something, or fill a river and then freeze it with summon Ice. Summon Wind to get something down from a tree, summon Earth to cross a gap. There are plenty of possibilities there, and you just unlock more exploration options the further you get in the game. Maybe have Melia learn some arts as normal by leveling up, but lock the elementals, certain elemental summons, behind story progression, so once you get somewhere in the story, you can go back and unlock new regions there. Tyrea, she has bigger wings than Melia, and while she's technically, I think, 3/4 Entia, 1/4 Homs, which is why she didn't get Telethiad, she also still has bigger wings, and you could see in Melancholy Tyrea that she could use them to fly. So I'd say probably nerf that a little bit. You shouldn't just be able to fly. This isn't X. You don't need to fly to get to places. But when you're playing as her, and of course, like Torna, you'd be able to swap between which character you're controlling on the field with a button press. Maybe in battle, but I think that makes more sense. Actually, no, that would make more sense here than my X2 idea, since you only have 3 party members. So just have one button dedicated to swap party member, and you can swap who you're controlling at will even while you're fighting. I guess, assuming the character you're controlling isn't down or stunned or something. So Tyrea would get maybe a double jump and a glide that would allow you to navigate the world easier and get to places you couldn't otherwise, or just get vantage points, discover secret areas, and that kind of thing. And while obviously skip travel would be back, you can't have a Xenoblade game without that, sometimes you just want to walk around the world or go exploring for areas you hadn't been to before, but at the same time, you don't want to walk around at your walking speed. Well, I realized that Juju's buggy is the only confirmed civilian vehicle in the entire story of Xenoblade 1. Every other vehicle either belongs to a Defense Force member or the Defense Force for something, or part of Alchemoth. Like, there are some vehicles in there that seem to be public transportation, as well as, like, the Havres, and I guess Mechon technically count, but none of those are civilian-owned, and Juju's technically not a civilian, but his buggy is his own. So, yeah, you could just ride around in Juju's buggy, and we're not talking about how lame Final Fantasy XV's car is, no. You can, like, as long as it's reasonably flat, you can just drive that thing wherever you want in the world and use it to get places faster, and that would be kind of cool, I guess. Seems pretty interesting. So, mixing up navigation a lot while not mixing up combat too much, and again, reuse Biona's shoulder or retool it in general for one of the major areas and one of the towns. You would have to invent some new areas from scratch. Obviously, you could just reuse some of the Colony 9 geometry for New Colony 9, especially since the epilogue version was already there. You could probably reuse some parts of Tephra Cave and Biona's leg for, like, getting out to the big Biona shoulder-based area and that kind of stuff. And then you would obviously need to design, like, a final area, a couple dungeons, there's gotta be a forest place, and just a few interesting biomes. Maybe touch on things that weren't originally there in Xenoblade 1, like Tropical E? The Fallen Arm was supposed to be tropical, but it didn't really get that vibe. It felt more like Biona's Leg 2, to be honest. So, you could add in a few more biomes and that kind of stuff, but at the end, what is the story? How does this end? You gotta have some sort of villain and some climax, because this is an RPG. You can't stop with that. And my idea for that would be the remains of the Bionite Order. Yeah, a lot of people look down on the Half-Entia, but I'm sure some of them would join the Bionite Order if they were that devoted to the Bionis and the soul within it or something. And there would still be members around that just happen to be Half-Entia. And at some point you run into them, you realize they're causing trouble, they're trying to seek out people who know about certain types of ether or have records of certain things that the High Entia didn't keep but the Homs had, and you just run into certain new characters who are part of that group throughout the game, and eventually at some point they reach their goal. Their goal is to try and bring back Zenza. Now, you could have Melia straight up know that, yeah, that's impossible, I saw him get destroyed, I literally saw the spirit of the Monado be like, yo, he dead. Shulk chose not to bring him back and that kind of thing. But that, just because they're not going to be able to succeed in what they're trying to do doesn't mean they're not dangerous and not hurting people, and obviously Melia and probably Tyrea too are going to find their relatives and that kind of thing. They're going to want to protect them, because Melia at the very least would love them as family instantly. And also, just Melia and Juju, at the very least, and probably Tyrea as well, after the development she'd be going through, would want to actually protect people and want to stop these guys. So their plan would be somehow to kill a lot of people, gather ether, deliver it to the corpse of the Bionis, which is in New Colony 9, or just in the sea outside it, which would be why the final battle would take place there, not someplace out in the new world you're exploring. And the way they're doing that is to gain power and somehow tap into their High Entia cells, but not entirely. So they need to try and find the type of ether that Lorithia used to force turn the High Entia into Telethia when she did that, to basically awaken the Telethia cells inside them, but still retain their sentience and their free thought and their knowledge. So basically, some sort of High Entia Telethia hybrid where they're only half transformed, basically. The Homs half keeps their mind intact, but they gain the powers and dangerousness of a Telethia. So that is your final foe, and eventually the party, probably with some other Homs and maybe some wild Napon or something, maybe throw in some random new race to start setting up this new world, and have some of those people come with the main party back to New Colony 9. And that's where your big climactic final battle takes place. That's where you get to see the rest of the party members from the original game start shining. That's where you see them fighting. It depends on your opinions on what you'd want to do as sequels to Xenoblade 1. I would like to see sub-sequels or a future Xeno series tie into this, somehow visit this universe and get help. Like, have Shulk come in, help that new protagonist as a supporting character or something. And somehow Alvis would come back for that or something, just to give Shulk power to put him again on the level of a protagonist for another Xeno game who's in their prime. So you get to see the inside of Shulk's weapon lab and stuff, and he'd use the replica Monado to fight in this scene. There'd probably be some cool scene of him, like, pulling off the lab coat, and he's got probably not his old outfit, but some other adventurer clothes type thing on, and he joins the fight alongside Fiora, Ryan, Charla, all those people, that kind of thing. But also, just as a potential hint, Shulk picks up the replica Monado and uses it, and he probably has a junk sword on the wall or something too, but also just in the corner of his lab, have the Monado 1 sitting there. Don't acknowledge it or anything, just show that, yeah, that implies that Alvis is still out there, and if the world is ever in so much trouble where his power is needed, he'd be able to come back and help Shulk. Just imagine, this is a huge digression from the idea of this Melia game, but some future Xeno series game, like the third game in that series, you realize that the plot is something about hopping between worlds with some mysterious power that's probably going to be the Zohar. And at the end of that trailer, you see a figure, cloaked or something, with the hand on the Monado 1, overlooking a field similar to the title screen of Xenoblade 1, and you just hear in Shulk's voice, "Well then, old friend, it looks like we're needed once again." And cut to the trailer there, or just have the Monado flare up or something. That would be a ridiculous teaser that would probably kill a very large amount of Xeno fans. So, you leave the possibility for that open, but not acknowledge it at all here, beyond Shulk using a replica Monado to fight. And I guess you could have Dunban using a replica Monado, or like all the other party members just use replica Monado versions of their normal weapon types to give them some additional power or something. I don't know how necessary that would be, because the other characters besides Shulk grew a lot as well in terms of their fighting capability, so I don't know how necessary that would be, but you get to see them all fighting, kicking a little ass. Maybe as a joke, have Ricky take a hit, drop his biter, and then his one kid who's bestest Nalpon picks it up and like beats up one Hyentia with it or something. But the other specific scene beyond like the final battle of, just because you don't want to have too many other playable characters in this game, because it's a spin-off, it's a shorter campaign, so it would end with, yeah, alright, you three, Melia, Tyrea, Juju, take on the head dude. The rest of us will hold the other guys off, like, to have to let the people and the rest of the monsters they got with them or something. So you could fight the final battle, and that's your excuse for only having 3 party members in the final battle. But I'd like to see Dunban do another badass thing, basically. And that being, he never fully lost use of his right arm. It got paralyzed. He was unable to use it for much. A year after the Battle of Sword Valley, he could barely hold a spoon. But by the time they were climbing up Makanis, he was holding a water flask. He was obviously slowly and surely regaining use of his right arm. So I want to see the scene where he's fighting maybe the lieutenant of the Half-Entia Telethia Bionite people. And he's just dueling them, he's doing epic katana stuff and fighting them off fine. But they're at a stalemate. And then he just rips the cloak part off of his right arm, tosses the katana up, grabs it, and then just starts going to town on the guy, because several years after he stopped touching the Monado, his arm is probably back to normal, and Dunban is not left-handed. He is a righty. He is going to wreck that guy's shit. And then it could just be Dunban leading, like, the last stand for his generation, him and Vanguard maybe being the last people around for the original battle of Sword Valley or something. That being the final passing the torch stuff. As for the actual ending, I'm not actually sure how I'd want to end it. I guess it would be Melia and Tyrea going off to live with their Homs families or something, because there's not really a Hyentia people that's big enough for her to actually rule over. So she could just embrace the Homs side, be the elder of that family and that kind of thing, and maybe somehow find closure with herself. She doesn't necessarily need to find a person to be with, like a romantic partner, for this to work, and that kind of ties into 2 other things I want to talk about. The first one would be art style. Obviously, this isn't a thing that's ever going to be made, but I like thinking of how I would like it to be made if it was, and I went over all the stuff about the actual content of the game, but in terms of logistics, I would want this to be the thing that Monolith Soft's new hires work on first before touching a brand new Xenoblade game. Have them work on a smaller campaign in an existing world. They specifically were recruiting fans of Monolith Soft work, so, oh, people who are fans of Xenoblade 1 have now grown up and applied and are now working at Monolith Soft, so let's let them work on something connected to Xenoblade 1 and do that kind of stuff. And also, if people end up not liking this, because they could just make the excuse of, oh, this was a test run for these new Team Monolith people, we could just say, oh, that never existed, that's a non-canon thing, and either never follow up on Xenoblade 1 or do something else in the future, that kind of stuff. And they specifically mentioned in their most recent hiring post that they want to have a distinct art style for Monolith Soft, similar to how Square Enix and I guess Final Fantasy as a whole has Nomura. Unfortunately, with the type of story that, like, the sort of introspective, a lot about the self, personal growth, this could be as much of a character study as Melia as a small continuation to Xenoblade 1. Ironically, I feel like this is the one Xenoblade game, besides the designs of the Torna characters, where Nomura's art style for the characters would actually make a lot of sense. Like, I could definitely picture the key art of Melia for this game being her in the traditional Nomura stare off into distance with the super sad looking eyes, and hey, she's got white hair, that's his favorite color to put on characters, it makes sense. Although obviously this would be the first instance of the new Monolith art style, and it would be a way for people to see all these old characters not only aged up in some cases, but also in a new style, and there'd actually be the old versions of the characters to compare to, so that's a way that they could get feedback and get the fans' opinions on the new art style and that new direction. The other thing is the subtitle. Torna the Golden Country was actually Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Torna the Golden Country, so this thing, even though it's a sequel, would be Xenoblade Chronicles : something, or dash something, some kind of subtitle. I couldn't think of a good subtitle. In the thumbnail, I use this logo that uses the subtitle "Till Death Do Us Part." I only used that because that was the first thing I could think of when I first came up with this idea a while ago, but in practice that name makes zero sense. Yeah, the whole concept of this would be platonic love and familial love and making connections with people, finding the place where you belong, and yeah, I guess till death do us part, you want to find people that you want to stay with for the rest of your life and don't want to ever part from until you have to, because what if you died? But also, that's a marriage-related thing, and the whole point of this is Melia doesn't necessarily need that kind of relationship. Like, obviously she's gotten over Shulk by that time, and you probably don't have to acknowledge it at all. The whole game would just be her finding a family, but it just doesn't work. So that's one thing I'd like to see in the comments, an idea for a subtitle. What I did when I made this mock-up logo was I basically combined the European Xenoblade 1 logo and the North American Xenoblade 1 logo, where Europe got Xenoblade Chronicles, both of them in Helvetica, like we're used to, but North America for some reason didn't take the European logo, which already existed, and instead did something similar to the Japanese logo, where they had a smaller font, the subtitle, Chronicles, which I think the Japanese title was Xenoblade, and then Chronicles was a subtitle, because X is just Xenoblade X and 2 is just Xenoblade 2, so the subtitles of the games are actually Chronicles X and 2 in Japanese. Thankfully, I like the European design better, and I'm glad that they stuck with that for the other games, but I just figured, put the subtitle the same place. I couldn't get the exact font, but that's what I did for that. And yeah, that's all I got. At the end, you could just have people reaffirm, oh yes, this is a big world out there. I think our story is done, but I'd like to stick around and see what new stories develop and maybe help out the next generation of explorers, of adventurers, of people who care for this world and want to protect it. We don't have gods, and Shulk doesn't want to be a god, but that doesn't mean he doesn't want to guide new people. So that's just a way to set up future games in this setting. It's a bit of a sequel hook just in case you want to return here for a future Xeno title, or just have a new setting for games that aren't really Xeno games, but just happen to take place in a world that used to be the world of one. And just have other characters stick around. Like Melia is probably about 18 in Ham's years, and she'd be 90 plus by the time Till Death Do Us Part takes place. I'm just going to use that for the title because I can't think of anything better. But she still has hundreds of years to go. She could be kicking around. A Machina could be kicking around. You could revisit something a couple decades later. Have maybe Dunban's dead, but Shulk is still around helping out and stuff. The possibilities are endless, and I'd like something that gives Melia closure to also touch on those possibilities and sort of, again, gauge interest in creating new stories in this new world, but also just letting people's minds flourish, because this was just me extrapolating stuff from the ending of the game and being like, yeah, it'd be kind of cool, I'd like to see a game about this. And doing something like this would probably just fuel the thoughts and discussion, as long as it didn't butcher anything. That's all I got. This video was a lot longer than I thought, so I'm going to stop talking now. Thank you once again for 10,000 subscribers, and I hope you stick around for a year more, I guess. I've been doing this for about a year. 10,000 more doesn't make sense, since you're going to be the same 10,000. I don't know. Until next time, this is Luxon, signing off.